Hello and welcome to Renegades of Light. My name is Morgan. I am half of the duo you'll see here in this space and just really excited to be opening up this container to bring trainings and teachings and guidance and support to this community here. Today, I'm just going to be giving a little background on my story just to open up some space for vulnerability and relatability and sharing a little bit of how I got to where I'm at today and doing the work that I'm currently doing. So I think it starts with most of my unlearning or reprogramming has been related to events and moments from childhood trauma. I think it's safe to say that most of us have some experience there, whether it be catastrophic or not, where perhaps our parents just weren't able to meet our needs emotionally, physically, mentally, whatever it might be, or maybe even not even sure how to meet their own. Or maybe not even sure how to meet their own. My parents met young, high school sweethearts. They had one of those very toxic love relationships where that's just all that they knew love to be. I'm the oldest of 5 kids from the same parents. My sister and I are closer in age, and then there's a big gap, and I have 3 younger brothers. I always joke that for years my parents kept having more kids, hoping that it would help, and I'm not sure that it ever did. Growing up, the only constant and stable that I had were my grandparents, my Nan and Papa from my mom's side. They were safety. They were an example of a loving, healthy relationship. And my parents were very toxic. There was a lot of fighting, a lot of yelling. There was a lot of illness in my mom. There was a lot of lack. She just had no desire to do more, to work, to really take care of us in a lot of ways. I think a lot of times it was hard for her to just show up for herself at all. And then for my dad, he worked hard. But I feel like he stayed away from home a lot because he didn't want to be around my mom. So there was a lot there. We lived in Vegas, and childhood there was okay. It had its ups and downs. There was a lot of good and there was a lot of bad. And I've moved through a lot of that. But overall, early on, I was exposed to really being a friend to my parents and not a child. So I knew when money problems were happening. I knew when my mom was cheating on my dad. I knew when they were fighting or there were struggles or issues because I was put in the middle. And I did a lot of protecting. And I did a lot of protecting of my little sister and myself, and just trying to create a safe space for us in a very chaotic and toxic environment. My parents started to have more kids, and so we moved to a small town in southern Utah. And that's when a lot shifted for me. It was a big year. We moved. I moved into an environment from being in Vegas to having friends and growing up in the same environment, and being in a bigger city where there were things to do. And I loved to shop and go to the mall and spend time with my friends. And I was very confident in who I was and who I wanted to be. And then we moved, and it was like it all got taken away. So, suddenly I was this strange person because I dressed differently and I wore a little makeup in like 6th grade, and I loved to put lipstick on, and my parents let me, and my skin showed where others didn't. And I just mean by like wearing a tank top or short shorts or but yeah, I was in a very strict Mormon community, and it was really challenging to make friends, kids couldn't come to our house because we weren't Mormon and we weren't at the church on Sunday and we didn't have the same beliefs. And it was really the first time in my life where I started to feel that judgment piece. And then that turned into a lot of like seeking validation outside of self and losing that confidence that I had once had. And it took me, I would say, well over a decade at that point to find that again, which was really hard. So I spent from 5th grade until high school graduation in Utah, and it just never felt fully comfortable or like I could be myself there. I was grateful. I spent a lot of summers in California with my aunt and uncle, and that was nice to have an escape. But basically, that was kind of childhood toxic fighting, drama, chaos, instability. We moved every year my whole life. And then when I was 10, my papa passed away and a lot shifted. Any ounce of normalcy that my mom had was gone. She started turning to prescription drugs and alcohol to numb and escape. My dad worked a lot, and my sister and I hid a lot of what was going on in this fear that he would leave us behind. So there was a big battle for a couple years there. And finally, my parents split after a crazy move to New Jersey. I mean, this time period in my life, I was really not attending school. I was losing my hair. I had bald spots all over. I was turning to food for emotionally eating and just like feeling comfort in anything that I could find. I was had severe insomnia. I was so afraid to close my eyes and wake up to something else being wrong in my world. Just a lot of darkness and heaviness, and I had to be strong. There was no other choice but for me to be strong for my now 4 siblings, and the younger ones were 3, 2, and a baby, for some perspective. So my parents finally split up, and my sister and I were old enough that we got to choose, and we chose to live with my dad, and we went back to Utah from New Jersey. And then there was a couple year custody battle, between then there was a couple year custody battle between my parents for my brothers, and it was very ugly, very toxic. My parents would agree to one thing and then not drop them off and keep them, and back and forth for a couple years. And my poor brothers were caught in the middle of all the toxic. And finally, one of my aunts told my dad, "We're going and we're fixing this, and this is ending now." And my sister and I had to testify against my mom in court. And my dad got custody, and things kind of normaled out from there. They had stability. They lived in the same house growing up. They have the same friends still to this day. Things weren't always easy with a single dad raising 5 kids. I took a lot on at 11, 12 years old. I was cooking and cleaning and getting straight A's, because to me, I always knew I needed to go and get an education and make a life for myself. So there were all these pressures early on for that in me. But yeah, I mean, between my dad and I, we kind of, did it all. And I taught him a lot. I taught my dad how to cook in some ways and take care of a house. It's something I'd always been interested in, and sat and did with my Nana. Not knowing how early I would need those skills that I was practicing. But yeah, I mean, we kind of did it all. I would take my brothers to daycare and pick them up and make sure homework was done and dinner. And I was in a lot of activities myself. So it was always just navigating all of the things all the time. And then you add puberty and growing boobs and navigating, whatever a relationship might be at that time in your life, and high school, and, drama and all of those things. So it was not always easy, I'll say. I learned a lot in that time. And when I was 17 and graduated high school, I made the choice to move away and go to college. And it wasn't an easy decision because I felt like I was abandoning my brothers and it was my responsibility. But the one thing that pushed me forward was this voice that said that they will always learn more from what I do than what I say. And so even though I left, by me leaving and traveling and living in the world and, doing things outside of that small bubble that we had grown up in, it would give them the opportunity someday to do the same. And then at 18, for some reason, I had drank and partied a little in high school, but never anything too crazy. But I had it instilled in my mind that if I went to a normal college, that I might get sucked into a life of toxic behavior or addiction. And so I chose to go to a private Christian university because I didn't want that to be an issue. I didn't want the temptation there. And I will say I don't regret much in life because I think it all takes us exactly where we're at. But given the opportunity to have a do-over there, I probably would have. I stuck it out for 4 years and I have my degree in biochemistry and a minor in biblical studies. And I learned a lot. It wasn't all bad, but I will say it was next to moving to Utah, it was definitely a time in my life where I felt extreme judgment and kind of ridicule from people around me because I wasn't a pastor's kid or a missionary kid. I grew up very different. I felt like I had to hide a lot of who I was in my story because it didn't fit into everyone else's stories. And so that was hard. It was the most depressed I've ever been in my life, being, constantly around people and yet feeling so isolated and alone in who I was. And then I just started to kind of navigate life as an 18-year-old, and I was living in near LA in Orange County and just really started to kind of find my bearings. I was working 3 jobs and nannying, and I cheered and had school and all these things going on. But by my junior year, I really started to understand and appreciate and honor myself and my own needs and what that looked like. And at that point, I'd had years of a struggle with relationship with my mom. It was very toxic. I suffered from chronic migraines for most of my childhood. And then my senior year, I began dating a gentleman who I'd known since high school. And it was long distance. He was in the military at the time. And December of my senior year of college, he gave me this ultimatum of, if you don't see how toxic your mother is to you, I can't sit back and watch. So it's me or her. And at the time, I was so head over heels in love that it was kind of a no-brainer, and I chose him. And it was such a big life lesson early in my life that no matter who the person is, even the person who literally brought me into this world, if they are not serving my highest good, if they are not contributing good into my life and supporting me, then they don't have space there. And so in a very ugly, toxic situation, literally my mother trying to throw herself out of my moving vehicle on the I-5 freeway in Los Angeles, I ended that relationship with my mom, and I changed my phone number and I cut her out completely. And it was like I could breathe for the first time in a really long time. I lost 15 pounds in a couple of weeks without changing any part of my life. That was 12 years ago, and I have not had that level of a migraine since, if at all. And that was just proof of how much we hold in our physical that's attached to our emotion. And so then life kind of coasted along. I moved to Hawaii. I was with my boyfriend, and he was in the military. It was a beautiful year of being in that space and the island and a lot of love. And then we moved to the East Coast, and it was the first time I was completely away from anything and everyone I'd ever known in a small space. And it was really challenging for us and for myself. And so I dove into just working a lot. I worked like 2 jobs and was going back to school. And, looking back, we were both actually just really depressed and kind of turned against each other. And so things definitely fell apart. And when he told me that I should move back home, I thought that my world was going to end, and I didn't know what life would be without him. At 24, we'd planned our whole future together, so it was devastating, but I did what I do best. I bounced back and immediately flew my sister out, and we took whatever fit in my car, and I drove west, back to my family, back to home, back to what I knew, and just started picking up pieces. So I moved back to where I went to college because I still had friends there. And then getting there, I ended up really not connecting back with any of them, but just finding new friends and new space. I started working in restaurants and gave myself permission to just kind of be, to have a broken heart, to cry, to date whoever I wanted or whatever it might look like. So I did have a lot of fun, maybe too much fun. Met some really great people, met some not so great people, met some people who taught me a lot of really good lessons in that time. So it was like 3 years. I was back in California, navigating life, finding my bearings. I accumulated a dog from our relationship. I was never a big dog person. I didn't grow up with them necessarily, but we got a dog when we lived back east. And then in the breakup, I got the dog. So now here I am, single, navigating life with a dog in LA, and not just like any dog, a very highly active, needs a lot of attention, hunting dog who's used to having a lot of land and space to roam. So that made life challenging too, just to find spaces to live and roommates and everything. And, so many people around me were telling me I should just, rehome my dog, and I wouldn't dare. I loved him so much. He meant so much to me. Like, how could I possibly? But that was hard. He would destroy parts of the house, screens and doors and walls and bark. And it made it really difficult for me to work and have healthy relationships with people that I lived with. So then we got our own space, and that was still toxic for us. Just like my dog, couldn't be alone, and the neighbors. So it was years of that. I battled that, and I'll share a little bit more. But I ended up working my way up in the restaurant I worked in. I worked my way up to management and then upper level management. Things were feeling good. I was like in shape and feeling really great about my body and who I was. And then I fell in love with a woman, and I was like 25, 26. And I always told myself after my breakup that the next person, it would just be one of those, like, and they would either be equal or better to what I experienced or felt before. And I did. I knew instantly, but it shocked my system that it was a female. It was never anything I'd really given any thought to. I guess I'd never thought against it, but I never saw myself in that type of relationship. And that was another huge pivotal moment. And I'll share more on that whole story at some point. But it gave me permission to kind of be whoever the fuck I wanted to be and not give a shit what anyone else around me said. And if people loved me, then they would love me for who I am and they would support me. And if they didn't, then again, they don't belong in my space. So that was like a huge blasting of my life path. And then, navigating that, being new, it was one of those relationships that was brought into my life to really just kind of teach me that lesson, I feel, and open me up. And then I started to do a lot of toxic things. So I don't know, for any of you who have lived or been in or around LA, it's easy to get sucked into the rat race. And so I found myself having the job and new car, and I got this beautiful new studio that's never been lived in and had it decorated exactly how I wanted, and life felt good. And as I got a promotion at work, I also got an opportunity to step out of the restaurant industry and get a job in pharmaceutical sales, which was more attached to my degree. So I was like, hell yeah, I'm going to do this. And so all these shifts and transitions were happening, and I felt like I was high on life. And it only lasted about 3 months. And then I had my boom spiritual awakening. So clearly I was living very out of alignment for what I needed to be doing or what my mission or purpose was here. And after that 3 months of bliss, if we want to call it, my whole world started to crumble. My dog ate everything that I owned: bedspread, mattress, couch, the drywall of my new place. He could open the door. It was like a hotel lock. So if you pull the handle, it unlocked it. So he was escaping, and I was having to leave work early all the time. And it was so bad. I couldn't find a dog sitter for him. And when I would, it would like spike his anxiety. I got an animal communicator, and this was like before I was into woo-woo. So I was just trying anything. My car got repossessed, which was like so strange because I actually was financially okay, but it was like I was spending money on all these things and like events and shows and alcohol and things I didn't need, and not taking care of home. And those are like the lessons that I see in it now. Like I remember when my car had taken, I'm like, I have all the money to pay for it right here. And it was like this guy was like, well, it's too late. And I'm like, what do you mean it's too late? Like, here it is. And it was such a humbling moment for me in my life. But I felt like everything had to be ripped out, and that was the whole lesson. So my house was being destroyed. I was literally sleeping on like my bed that was eaten by my dog. Like I have pictures I'll have to share at some point, maybe. And I was dating very toxic humans, and I was being not so kind to humans who were extra kind to me. And it was just bad. And I remember talking to my sister a lot during this time and just like, needing support. I quit the pharmaceutical job, like thinking it was something I wanted for so many years, and then getting into it and realizing like the ick factor of just being this pretty face, and you go sit in an office for hours and wait to get a signature and just like schmoozing people. Like it was just so not me. And so my sister lived in Seattle, and she's like, why don't you come here? And I was like, no, I can't leave everything. Da, 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 da. And we have like a childhood friend that we've known since 5th grade. And so she kind of reached out to her and asked like maybe for some support for me. And she was like, well, why doesn't she go see my Reiki practitioner? I have no idea what Reiki is at this point. And the lady happened to, so my friend lives in Utah and just does this virtually or remotely. And this is like, before this was even a thing. And she gives me a lady's information. The lady lived, like I could throw a rock at her office space from my house. And I'm like, all right, universe, I hear you. I see you. Again, this is before I was into all the woo, but I was catching on to what it was saying. So I went and I had a reading, and it very much just kind of reset me and gave me some insight. I went home. I don't know if it was that night or a couple nights later, but I had this dream, and I woke up and I felt such peace. And the dream was just like me standing in the front yard. My nieces were there, or my niece, I only have one niece at the time. And I looked up and saw this green mountain. And when I woke up, I was like, that's Seattle. I need to go. So I called my sister, and I basically was like, all right, I'm coming. So it took me about, I think, 3 weeks to tie up loose ends, get out of my place, like deal with the car situation, deal with the dog. I put him in a trainer for those 3 weeks because with everything else going on, I couldn't deal with that anymore at that moment. worked as much as I could, said my goodbyes, and I left and I drove to Seattle and moved there. And that was really my first cracking open. I spent a year in Seattle. I lived with my sister, my brother-in-law, and my niece, and my second niece was born. And it was just something I didn't realize how badly I needed, but just a sense of home and family that I'd never felt in such a long time. And it brought me so much peace and closeness to them in ways that like I still like they are my home. I learned a lot. I just worked in bars there. I met some really cool people. I started doing just my own moon practices and kind of Googling them and, you know, getting some crystals and saging and stuff and really just opening that up. And then I knew it was time to go back to Hawaii. I'd been away there for 6 years and I'd always felt the call to be back, but it was in the right timing. So I started going to talk therapy, helped me out tremendously. I obviously suffered from PTSD. So I did a lot of work around that. And I think I just needed someone to tell me that I wasn't crazy like my mom. And was able to do all the paperwork to get me and my dog moved to Hawaii the following year. So that was just a very peaceful year for me. I got my physical body back in shape, which was huge and monumental for me. I tried acid for the first time or psychedelics, and that just opened me up in so many ways. And then I got to Hawaii, and I'm going to kind of speed up these next little bits here, but I spent about 3.5 years in Hawaii. The first 6 months were every day me saying, holy fuck, what did I do? I need to go back. I literally moved out there with like $100 to my name, but I had a house paid for a month and I had a job lined up, so I knew it'd be okay. My first roommate was someone I knew from college, and after about 3 months, I realized the level of toxic that she was and was pushed to such points of anger that I've never experienced in my life, but realized that she was bringing up a lot of mom stuff. She reminded me of my mom in a lot of ways. So a lot of my anger that came up was not necessarily directly towards her. Although I'll still attest to it here and now that I just don't think that she is the kindest human. And I hope that wherever she's at in her journey now, she's found some love for herself in that. But it was a lesson, and it brought up mom stuff and female stuff and just like, you know, friendships lost, knowing, you know, who's there for you and who's not. And then, you know, my dog was there causing the same problems. So eating furniture, eating things, I would run him and run him and run him, and it was still not happening. And then I moved out of that house and was looking for myself a space, and just having a dog was hard. And then he couldn't be left alone, and I worked nights, and there were all these things. So I remember my partner I was dating at the time was so supportive and is such a beautiful, magical human to this day for like standing by my side in all of this, because it really wasn't fair to her. But I was like crying on the bathroom floor, and it was like this moment where I knew I had to get rid of my dog, who would become my best friend. But she said to me, like, you preach all the time about like removing toxic people and things from your life, and if your dog was a person, I feel like you would have let go of it a long time ago. And that was like what I needed to hear. So luckily I was able to rehome him in like a special way, and like 60 people were interested, and I got to interview them and do like weekends where he would, you know, test it out. And I joke now that he lives a retired life in Hawaii and he's very happy. And I see him from time to time when I'm there. But I always said if I didn't have the dog, I would live very cheap and travel. So once I rehomed him, that was my mission. Just weeks after that, I met a woman. I had ended that partnership and met a woman at my bar. I shook her hand and I had this moment of knowing that she wasn't the best thing for me, but she was going to teach me some powerful things in a short amount of time, like one of those fast and quick. And so I'm sorry, but it's pouring rain here, and you're just gonna get that in the background because I can't stop it. But that shifted a lot. So that was like March of 2017 or 18, I think. And I literally started traveling the world. So with her, I went to Costa Rica, and then a month later, we were traveling the States and Vegas, and I tried Molly for the first time, and I was opening my mind up in all these ways and seeing how easy it was to travel. I always thought it was so hard. And then we went to the UK, and I was like, all, you know, in between working, travel, working, travel. The UK was fun until it wasn't. And that's when I realized, like, okay, you were just here to teach me about this piece of travel and like importance of that, but I'm done. So I got back to Hawaii and just like got my bearings and was just really enjoying life for what it was. I started traveling solo. And so for most of 2019, every month I went on a trip by myself. I went bucket list and saw my favorite band, Fleetwood Mac, at Madison Square Garden. I spent time with family and celebrating birthdays in the States. I went to Australia and dove the Great Barrier Reef. I went snowboarding with my dad for his 50th birthday in Mammoth in California. I did this transformational healing retreat in LA for myself. And then I was going to go to Italy for my birthday in August. And every time I went to book, I was hearing about Peru and ayahuasca, and I didn't know what ayahuasca was. And so I went, and the stars aligned, and all the things happened over the months of me preparing to go. And I'll tell more of the story. But I went there and I met my wife, and it changed my life in so many ways. The biggest message from my 3-week journey was to go and leave behind all of the things that are no longer serving me. And it took a little time, but I did slowly walk away from a lot. And it wasn't that they were bad, it's just that they weren't serving my highest good anymore. And so that was 2 years ago. And obviously this is pre-pandemic, but in the last 2 years, I have been with teachers, mentors, trainings. I went and studied Reiki in Japan. I've worked with such beautiful teachers in the Akashic records and past life regression, and doing my own healing and work. A lot more work with plant medicine, psilocybin and ayahuasca, cacao. So just a lot of rich sacred practices, doing more study and healing through trauma and the inner child. And I've been doing this work on myself and now get to bring it to my clients. And that's kind of what brought me here. So the pandemic fully pushed me into my own business and coaching. And I continue to learn and grow and expand in so many ways. But I'm just really excited to bring not only my background and my own experiences to this space, but a safe place for others to come and feel heard and seen. So I am looking forward to sharing more with you. I am excited for this journey. Thank you for listening, and I will see you all in this space soon. Stay tuned for more.